everyone, welcome to Medical Dialogues. I am Dr. Nandita Mohan, and today I have a very interesting topic for all of you. Now, I will be talking about a recent systematic review and a meta-analysis on paternal depression and the risk of depression among offsprings. Now, this research that I'm talking about today is published in the JAMA Network Open. Now, we all are aware that depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and even loss of interest sometimes. Now, it affects how you feel, you think, behave, and often can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems. You may have trouble even doing normal day-to-day activities, and sometimes you may feel that life isn't worth it after all. Now, having this concept in mind, has it ever struck to you all that there could be a possible link between paternal depression and the risk of depression among offsprings? Come, let's find out. So to discuss more about this relationship, we have with us on board today one of the co-authors of the study that I'm talking about today, Professor Rosa Alati, who is the head of the Curtin School of Population Health, recently, which has been formed from the amalgamation of the School of Public Health and the School of Psychology. Prior to this appointment, she was the head of School of Public Health at Curtin University. Professor Alati has had a keen interest in promoting good mental health to the whole community, supporting a number of programs and collaborations currently in operation. She has an established track record in the epidemiology of substance use and mental health problems. Welcome to Medical Dialogues, ma'am. We are really happy to have you on board here with us today.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
So, just to give you a heads up about the study that we're talking about, ma'am, we've heard that there is an association, we've often heard that there is an association between maternal depression and offspring depression, which actually what led you to correlate the paternal depression factors per se affecting the mental issues that have been developing in the offsprings?
Yes, as you are saying, there is an established association between maternal depression and offspring depression. There have been many longitudinal studies that over time have measured the depression of the mothers, sometimes even during pregnancy, and then they have correlated it to the depression of their children, sometimes many years later. And yes, there is an established association between the depression of the mothers and the depression of their children. Now, it becomes therefore quite an interesting question, doesn't it, to wonder, well, children don't really live in a vacuum, do they? They live with mothers, but they also live with fathers. They live with siblings. So how would it be possible that there is also an association between the depression of the fathers and their children's mental health? So what we have done is we have conducted a review of the existing literature, and as we expected, we haven't found many studies, but we have found enough study to be able to conduct a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is basically the pooling of all the results of each of the studies, which leads to one outcome. And after doing this, we have found that there is in fact an increased risk from the depression of the fathers that leads to children having a range of mental health problems. So it was, I suppose, an intellectual curiosity, but it was a curiosity that it makes sense. It makes sense because a family is made up of mothers, children, but also of fathers or male partners.
Very true, ma'am. So we've always associated maternal depression with offsprings. Now, this concept of having paternal depression brings into light. It is a new factor which definitely needs to be addressed, considering after COVID, the situation is being different. So in your study, if I talk about it, what were the major findings of your research and what impact does it have on the depression state of the fathers that we're talking about right now?
Yes, I suppose I should start saying that there aren't as many studies as we would have liked them to be, and therefore we encourage the research community to continue to study the relationship between fathers and their children, the father's mental health with the children's mental health. But for what we have found a 42% increase in the risk of children's mental health problems if the fathers had depression. That effect was even stronger if the father had severe symptoms of depression, compared to the fathers who had much less severe symptoms of depression. So these are the two important outcomes. Paternal depression matters, and the more severe the depression is, the more it matters for the mental health and mental well-being of their children. So what does it matter in terms of the mental health of the fathers? Well, I suppose this leads to us being more aware that despite the fact that depression has often been seen as a female condition, simply because it does affect female more than males, from what we know, but there still is quite a considerable percentage of the male population who does have symptoms of depression at some stage in their lives, and there is a smaller percentage of the male population who does become clinically depressed. And on top of that, what this study is also telling us, that leads to some impact on the child's mental health itself.
Very well said, ma'am. Paternal depression, now after hearing this, is a state that I think everybody should consider it as a factor as well that can affect the mental issues of the offspring. So talking about the conclusion that the findings that you just mentioned, what factors cumulatively, if we talk about, led to the conclusion of this association between the paternal depressive state that is affecting the mental health of the developing offspring?
Mostly the factors that led to that conclusion was that in looking at all the studies that had analyzed the association between paternal depression and children's depression, we found that no what we call confounding factors. Confounding factors are factors that could be the real cause of the relationship that we see. We found that despite accounting for those factors, this relationship stood. So what is important is that we do in the future consider the importance of paternal depression in any intervention that we have and that we give at family levels. And perhaps when we're trying to look at children's mental health, it is important to look at the family in his entirety. So not just the mother, not just the siblings, but also the fathers. Therefore, perhaps family-related interventions could be something that are quite important to look for, to establish in the future, or to favor in the future of interventions.
Great. So talking about the future that you've mentioned, that it is the paternal depression also that needs to be taken into account along with the maternal depression as well as the depression affecting from the siblings. So talking about it, what should be the future in line of the direction of this intergenerational transmission of these mental health problems?
I suppose in the future, when we look at parents having children, when we look at young families developing their children and having their children, perhaps we should look in advance and see what is the mental health of the couple. Perhaps it would be important to get to the conclusion of whether there is a mental health problem in the family. It could be helpful to do it earlier rather than later in the piece. And therefore, if there is an understanding that in a couple, one or two or both parents suffer from depression, maybe that could be addressed even before the child is born or during the child development, rather than getting to the point where children become impacted one way or another by the mental health of their parents. Because our research is basically telling us that children are being impacted if their parents have mental health problems, both mothers and fathers.
True. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your valuable insights. Just a small question that I had to add on is, keeping the COVID scenario that we just suffered from, the entire nation had the entire globe actually suffered from a vast spread of COVID. So did that affect or did that have an impact on your findings, or addition of depression, did that have an impact on it?
It is not an outcome from our study. Our study basically found that there is an association between paternal depression and child depression. What the COVID epidemic has done is to point us to point out that depression is an important clinical problem in our society, and in a way that is something that has helped us raise the profile of depression in the society. So it is no longer considered like a light issue, or something that people experience every now and then, but it is something that can really lead to very adverse and dramatic circumstances. But to answer your question, it is not necessarily something that we have found from looking at our research.
Thank you for coming to Medical Dialogues, and it was really great. It was a great interactive session to be interacting with you on this topic, which is the topic nowadays.
And thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Never miss a medical update from Medical Dialogues. Like, subscribe, and press the bell icon.